"The dead can't speak," they said. That's what my family thought it would be when they abandoned me to die after the wreck. But guess what? Death was my survival instructor. I've waited in the shadows for years, waiting for them to blow everything they thought they had stolen. Now I've returned, as much their victim as the one pulling the strings of their lives. They thought they buried me, but I've come back to bury them. And boy, revenge has never tasted sweeter. My friends on the Upper West Side in New York City grew up in a world of glamour and wealth, a world that I want to believe that I have discovered is all show and no substance. I'm Emily Carter, and for much of my life, I was the black sheep of the Carter family, who never quite conformed to the mold of perfection that my parents, Jonathan and Diane, so desired to portray. On the surface, we were a desirable family. A wealthy father who ran a successful restaurant chain, a beautiful mother who was the belle of the ball at charity galas, and two younger siblings, Nicole and Ryan, whom life seemed to protect from ordinariness. But beneath this surface, the truth was very different. My parents liked to present themselves as this perfect family that shimmered in fine clothes at parties and commanded space in the tabloids. We went to all the galas, wore the designer dresses, and smiled for the cameras. But behind those smiles often lay a much grimmer reality. The reality, however, was that my family was a veritable symphony of manipulation and favoritism. My father was a control freak, and my mother already a damn good socialite who has learned to be the perfect woman at the cost of her children's happiness. Since childhood, I have had the heavy load of meeting my family's expectations. My siblings were the favorite ones, praised and fussed over, but I was largely ignored, a cast-off. I can still feel the sting of my father's derision in the form of verbal slaps from words when I expressed my desire to go into business. "Why would you want to subject yourself to that, Em? You don't have it in the real world," he would say, condescension dripping in his tone. I heard those words, causing me to choke out every existing dream I ever had of not becoming anything but the family screw-up. My younger sister, Nicole, was the apple of our father's eye, a social media star in the making. The youngest, Ryan, was the charming, gregarious one, the striver, the one who wanted the spotlight. They were both so good at playing the roles that our parents adored, and they loved to rub it in that I was not as good. "You're just jealous, Emily," Nicole would taunt, tossing her hair while scanning her most recent sponsored posts on her phone. "You could never survive the pressure that we have on us." But the thing that hurt me the most was not my siblings' teasing. It was my parents' lack of interest. I saw them spending time on cultivating Nicole and Ryan's talents while I languished trying to navigate my own way. The dreams I'd had of being independent, of working for myself and launching my own line, felt more and more distant each day. Instead, I was cast in the subservient part of the dutiful daughter, the girl who humored her family while secretly believing she was a ghost haunting her own life. Collapsed. Being the mistress of such a wealthy man, I sat in his jazzy dining room in a posh penthouse he owned, with breathtaking chandeliers and imported china from France, and wondered what the outside world thought of us. They saw the fancy family, the perfect Instagram photos, our smiles that concealed our turmoil. But the reality was much bleaker. I was suffocating in the gilded cage my parents had constructed, and each day I was becoming more resolved to fly away. I had no idea a bid for independence would set off a showdown that would forever destroy the facade of our perfect family. The seeds of betrayal were already planted, and when the tragic accident occurred, it was just a turn of the corner for things to change. The first time I felt the cold steel of betrayal, it was worse than any physical wound. It was a bright fall morning in New York, leaves turning fiery shades of orange and gold, but we were, even then, enshrouded in the darkness of my family. I had just come home from an exhausting night shift at a local boutique, my aspirations of launching my own fashion line dangling by the thinnest of threads. Yet I was still hopeful. I'm a 30-year-old entrepreneur, and my father just said he would invest in my new business, which is still a small but promising project that kept me up at nights planning. I was ready to show the world, and most importantly him, that I was worthy of being more than just a shadow in the Carter family. I took my parents to dinner at our Italian place that night. I dressed with care, wearing a simple yet beautiful dress that I had been keeping for the big occasion. My heart pounded at the idea that I could finally share this vision with them. I'd even put together a presentation with drawings and a budget. I saw a picture of my father lighting up with pride, the way I always wished he would. Sitting across from each other, it felt deceptively warm. My father clinked his wine glass, tilted it, and led a toast. To family, he intoned, his voice booming with certitude. My mother smiled, her nails done just right and shining in the candlelight. I sighed, preparing to give an account of my dreams. Dad, I've been working on something really exciting, I said, my chest squeezing in a joyous burst. I would like to create my clothing line. It's one that I think is a little bit of a niche market, yet one that I think has a lot of potential. I just need... Before I had finished, my father interrupted me, waving me off. Emily, we've had this conversation. You're not experienced, and you don't have the connections. You need to concentrate on something that is realer. I could feel the disappointment in his voice resonating throughout my head. A dull throb. My heart sank as the feeling of the evening's warmth dissolved away to the cold, hard truth. But that night was only the first act of the betrayal. A few weeks later, while scrolling through social media, I came across a post that chilled my blood. It was a picture of my father, standing proudly before a wall of a new clothing line, one that suspiciously resembled the idea that I had pitched him just weeks prior. Its caption read, "So excited to announce our new chapter. Grateful to my brilliant children at Nikki Farrell and at Ryan Farrell for helping me follow this path." I felt my stomach drop. They had stolen my idea, which I had poured my soul into, and called it their own. It was not just the theft of my creative vision. It was the summation of everything I had feared. My family's absolute disregard for my worth, my hope, my dreams. I couldn't believe it. My own brother and sisters had colluded with our parents to rob me of my future. Infuriated and heartbroken, I confronted them at our family's penthouse. It was an oppressive atmosphere, the smell of betrayal thick in the air. I entered the living room, brothers all bathed in the light of their own success, browsing their phones. "Emily, you're back," Nicole piped up with false cheer. "You've got to see Dad's latest. It's amazing." "Is it great because it's my idea?" I snapped, my voice rising. The room went quiet, and their smiles turned to puzzled looks. "What are you talking about?" Ryan pretended not to know, but I could see the short, mute flicker of guilt in his eyes. "I mean the clothing line," I said, my voice trembling with rage. "You stole my concept. I believed in you, and you sold me down the river." Nicole laughed, a thin, scornful noise that went through me like glass. "Come on, Emily. You weren't going to use it anyway. You're just mad because we're finally doing something for ourselves." "Jealous?" I repeated, disbelief washing over me. "You're my family. You are supposed to prop me up, not take everything I've earned." Accusations were hurled back and forth to the point where the encounter turned ugly. My parents came in to check on me. They felt the tension. Rather than support me, they took my siblings' side and brushed away my fears as just jealousy. "Emily, it's time to act like an adult," my father told me coldly. "What you have to understand is ideas are ideas. The only thing that matters is satisfaction with execution, and your siblings didn't do a bad job executing." At that point, something dawned on me. I wasn't just dealing with treachery from my brothers, but my parents were responsible for a lot of this treachery. They had always preferred Nicole and Ryan, and now they were actually urging their deception. And they were having to eat a bitter pill. I was the good one. I was the one that had been there. I was the one that had loved. And there I was by myself, with all of my identity removed, all of my dreams crushed. As I stormed out of the penthouse, I experienced a darkness shrouding me, a determination settling in. This was not only a betrayal, it was a declaration of war. They'd taken everything away from me, but I wouldn't be this. I'd work out a way to rise from the ashes of their betrayal, and they would get what's coming to them. Unbeknownst to them, the mishap around the corner would alter the course of everything. But for now, I was angry and betrayed by the very people I loved most. The night it happened is embedded in my head like a terrible dream. The night my life was altered and the old Emily Carter died. I felt a cool breeze running down my hair, and the trees swayed, the way they did in New York, a city I had known so well and had once loved. But that seemed so oppressive to me now. I was coming back from a late-night meeting with an investor for a new business I was working on, a fashion line to help empower women. I was still living, my faith in survival restored after the betrayal that decimated my world. But hope is a two-edged sword, and that night would become a nightmare. I walked my way through the almost pitch-black downtown. I had a bad feeling that something was wrong. My gut screamed that something was fishy. The brakes of my car went soft, and the pedals slipped to the floor beneath my foot. Now, I was pressing even harder in a panic to regain control, but the car was on a mission and no one could stop it. For those frenetic minutes, time stretched out. I became increasingly aware of the crushing disappointment of my family's betrayal. The very people who had taken what I had built, panicked and abandoned me, and losing control of my life in the most all-encompassing way. Everything on the outside was a smear of lights and shapes, and my brain was chattering away faster than the ETIs. I hit a lamppost, metal against metal, and then everything went black. I woke up in a clean hospital room surrounded by the beeping of machines. I was enveloped in confusion, but an even greater sense of terror washed over me when I finally understood that I was by myself. My family had neither rallied to support me nor even inquired about me. That was when I saw the cruel irony behind it all. They had wanted me out. Once they stripped me of my identity, they set them up when they abandoned me to die. And days became weeks as I lay there in that hospital with a dozen broken ribs, a broken arm, and a concussion. I had become a shadow of myself, physically and emotionally. But then, as I began to heal, something was ignited in me. I might very well have collapsed under the burden of despair, but I opted to rise. The Emily they'd assumed was dead was not just the tragic victim of some accident, but a survivor. One not about to let her family's betrayal define her. I began to plan my rebirth. I began to reconstruct my own sense of self from the shards that remained. With the aid of an understanding nurse, I was able to form myself a new identity, one that left behind the negative threads of things past. I assumed a new name, Ella Reed, and a new character, one that was driven, biting, unapologetically ambitious. I recovered. As I did, I spent hours reading about finance and business, honing my expertise and arming myself with the tools to take back my life. The day I left the hospital, I was nervous and excited. I was getting out of the poor me world. I was a survivor, ready to reclaim everything that was taken from me. My name had finally made it back home to the Carters. And it would soon be my turn to exact my revenge on an enemy who no longer had buried me, but instead kept me alive in the most painful way possible, fueling my fire. I walked outside and took a deep breath, feeling the sun on my skin. I had been reborn, and I was all set to grab the map of my own destiny. Little did my family know the accident they thought they have rid themselves of me was only the start of a reckoning that they would never see it coming. A city that had once smothered me was now my strongest ally. I watched from the shadows as my family fell apart, and I built a new life. I was now Ella Reed, an identity which felt strong and unsullied by my history. The old Emily Carter was dead, but her spirit remained alive, propelling my search for justice. New name, new beginning. I'd landed a position at a small firm in finance, fast catching up with my colleagues from the start on account of my sharp analytical abilities. I jumped in headfirst in the investment and entrepreneurial world and soaked up as much knowledge as I could get, he says. I soaked up everything like a sponge and prepared myself for the day I would meet the Carters again. And all the while, I watched them from a distance, a silent spectator amidst the pandemonium that erupted after I had died. My family never hesitated to capitalize on my absence. They staged an opulent memorial service for a glittering social set attended. From my hiding place among the skyscrapers of Manhattan, I watched while my mother played her expected role to perfection. Tears coming on cue, tears that drowned a lily, the flower I had always hated. The cameras clicked, the drama being recorded for the tabloids. Family in mourning, the tragic loss of Emily Carter. The headline blared. But I had not disappeared. I was alive, and I was watching. Over the months, I gathered weekly reports on my family's precipitous decline. The Carters were falling apart without me to organize their lives. My father's chain of restaurants was going deeper and deeper into debt. Poor decisions and bad management had brought them to the brink of bankruptcy. Nicole's kind of dubious social media empire, built on shallow endorsements and vacuity, had come a bit unstuck. I'd never see her claim any real talent without me, and her subs were dropping drastically. The handsome Ryan, who was used to charming everyone he met, had frittered all his money away on wild parties, leaving him with massive debts. I chuckled when I scrolled through social media, watching the facade of my own family crumble. They were also pounding the door for help from rich friends. None replied. They were not the unassailable Carters anymore. They were that frail, desperate family. They were colluding with their own pride. While I collected intel, I also began to invest strategically, using a portion of my savings to build my own small empire. I pointed my work towards sustainable fashion, an area which I knew had potential, and before long I started to build a bit of a name for myself. I started doing freelance design and got hold of some good suppliers. Every win felt like a little step toward the ultimate plan to get even. But it was not enough to merely watch. I wished them to feel the guilt of their betrayal, to know the hurt they had caused me. And so I came up with an idea, a way to get at them without them knowing it was me. One night, after another disastrous family dinner at the penthouse, I made up my mind. I had heard that Jonathan was holding a fundraiser auction to save his restaurant from bankruptcy. This had been the perfect chance to let them know who I was, without revealing that fact. I finagled an invite under my brand new alias, Ella Reed, a rich investor swooping in to help out local businesses. I was excited as I got ready for the event. The evening of the fundraiser, I wore a smooth black dress that clung to my curves in all the right places, with a statement necklace that shimmered under the lights. I let my hair down. It's pretty long. And as I approached, I felt like a rock star. The rich, cloying smell of the expensive perfume and desperation hung in the air. My family was hobnobbing with the ruling class, painting on their smiles as masks to cover the misery underneath. As I weaved through the other children, I saw my parents, laughing with their rich friends, blind to the shitstorm happening around them. Nicole was sitting on a high stool, looking for possible new followers in the crowd, while Ryan was working a group of potential investors, running his mouth about his most recent business opportunity. I flushed with anger and pleasure at the situation. They were floundering for the last, tattered shreds of their power. I slowly approached the auctioneer's dais. Their gifts were being offered, lavishing vacations, exclusive art pieces, even one dinner with my own father, in an effort to save his failing company. I couldn't have asked for a better platform for it. As the auctioneer introduced the next lot, I jumped in with a high bid and all heads whipped my way. $100,000 for dinner with Jonathan Carter, I stated, my tone confident and strong. Whispers flew around the room as everybody looked at me with intense curiosity. When he saw me, Jonathan went pale. "Who are you?" he said in a daze, a look of disbelief written all over his face. The air crackled with tension, and I saw the spark in his eyes, the slow realization that I was no mere stranger, that I was the ghost he had never buried. "I'm someone who knows just what you did," I responded, smiling inwardly at this sudden power I had over her. "And I think it's time to settle up for your betrayals." The room gasped as I had just ripped my family's world apart. I had come out of the dark and the chase was on. I could feel the atmosphere in the room change. The words sank upon them like a wave as they stood looking up at me. I watched as the realization dawned across their faces, disbelief turning to confusion, and then to horror. They had believed they had buried me in my dreams, but here I was, alive and stubborn as ever. "Emily?" My mother was trying to be calm, but I could hear her voice waver with shock and disbelief. Hers came tumbling down first that day as she became the first of us to speak. "We thought—" "You thought what?" he said. I laughed. A sour laugh, but a laugh nonetheless. That I would just fade away? That I was just going to let you all off the hook? You stabbed me in the back, and now you're going to pay. My father's face was an interesting shade of red, the opposite of his normal, arrogant, conceited expression. You are about to get messed up the way you cannot even begin to imagine, he hissed, his voice low and dangerous. You are wrong, Emily. You're a baby walking in with dynamite to go play. Child? I repeated, my voice calm, taking a step closer towards him. I'm not a child anymore. You might not have taken me seriously, but I spent years learning from the very best. The span of that year when you abandoned me is the most I've ever learned about power and manipulation. The crowd was mesmerized, rumors running rampant whilst they were spectated the scene. I enjoyed the attention, for I knew that with each exposure of those lies, my family's finely woven tapestry of deception ever so slightly unraveled. They weren't the untouchable Carters anymore. They were made vulnerable and desperate. Why are you doing this? Nicole's voice finally returned, angry disbelief in her tone. This is insane, Emily. Shame on you. Shamed? I scoffed. You should be ashamed of yourselves. You stole my dreams, my thoughts, and you made them your own. You allowed greed and jealousy to eat away at you. I have no shame. I'm here to take back what's mine. Ryan, who had been taking all of this in while having not said word until now, chimes in. You think this is going to benefit you? You're nothing but a bitter, angry woman who wants to destroy our lives because you feel slighted. It was spoken scornfully, but I was able to detect the undercurrent of fear in his eyes. He was trying to summon bravado, but the cracks were showing. Ruin your lives? No, Ryan. I didn't come here to destroy your lives. I came here to get back what you took from me. I'm here to let you know the impact of your actions, I said, my voice rising with passion. And believe me, I will savor every second of it. On that note, I leaned down into my purse to pull up a pile of papers and hold in front of everyone's face. These are the contracts you signed when you hijacked my business idea. The signatures are right here, and let me tell you, they were not obtained in the manner we were promised. I also have proof of your mismanagement of funds and the shady deals you cut to try to keep your empire afloat. Gasps rose from the crowd, and I saw panic flash across my parents' faces. They'd believed they could bury the truth with me. Now it was coming back to bite them in the most public way. Why should anybody believe you? Jonathan said, barreling down his feelings. You're no more than a bitter daughter with a score to settle, he said. Am I? I shot back, without a moment's hesitation from my faith in God. I have evidence for all of these, and I'm not afraid to present them before the media. I will destroy your reputation, and I'll make sure it's known that there was never anything real behind the Carters' phony success. The tension in the air was palpable as I witnessed their world coming apart at the seams. They had lived lives based on lies and manipulation, and now were reaping the rewards of those lives. Do the audience care because it's soapy and entertaining? Or did their money and position draw them in originally, and now they are drawn in by the sheer drama? Emily, come on, Diane begged, desperation entering the edge of her voice. We can work something out. You don't have to do this. No, Mom. It's too late for that. You decided to betray. Now get ready to be betrayed. I'm going to seize control of the trust fund you thought was going to get away from me. And I'll be revving up my own fashion line, one that represents everything you were trying to destroy. While I talked, I could see it sink in. Their empire was falling, and there was nothing they could do. I felt such great relief at last. I wasn't only challenging my family. I was fighting for my life, my very identity, my dreams. The auctioneer, palpably shaken, attempted to regain control of the event, but the damage had been done. The Carters had been exposed, and I was the one to lift the curtain on their deception. I looked over my shoulder one last time before leaving and met my father's angry eyes. Enjoy the fallout, I said, my voice unwavering. This is because this is only the beginning. You thought you were going to bury me, but I've risen and I'm not going anywhere. And so I walked out into the cool night air, and for the first time, I felt free. I had confronted my demons, and I was ready to create a new path, where I wasn't a victim, but a force of impact and power. The nest of scandal ignited around my family in the aftermath of my encounter at the gala grew with a speed and ferocity that was nothing short of frightening over the course of the next several days. Scandal spread like wildfire thanks to social media and the papers, and suddenly the Carters found themselves in a position they had never felt before. Articles with headlines like, "Carter Family Scandal, the daughter they tried to bury speaks out," proliferated online. My former life had receded into a far distant past, and I had been endowed with a strength I had never possessed before. But as gratifying as it was to lift the veil from my family's lies, it also posed unexpectedly hard problems. I was soon to learn just how dangerous the world of riches and power is, and how many twists and turns there are lying around. Every single day was like a game of chess, and I had to stay 8 moves in front. The first turn was that my father, eager to redeem whatever remained of his reputation, hired a high-profile attorney, a man feared for his take-no-prisoners approach. He was a bully and mourned intensely, and in less than a week I got a letter threatening me with a lawsuit if I spoke about the family business. The letter, full of legal bluster and thinly veiled menace, made my stomach turn, but it also stiffened my resolve. I was no longer a frightened little girl who had cringed under my father's abuse. I was ready to fight. "I have another intelligent, witty attorney who is representing me," I called, and had an emergency meeting set up for this woman Rachel who was already up to speed on the situation. Toward Katie. "They're trying to knock you off your game, Emily," she said, looking fierce and leaning forward. "But that's the only bullet in their gun. You do have the truth on your side, and that is potent. We'll have the answers to their threats in facts." Rachel and I slaved away, rounding facts and getting ready for war. I had no plans to back down. If anything, I was even more determined to get back what was mine by right. Over time, the burden of my family's betrayal became my rocket fuel. But right when I thought I had somewhere checkmate-like to go after all, another turn occurred. Nicole, in one last-ditch attempt to salvage her falling social media empire, tried to pervert public opinion of me. She started making videos, portraying herself as the mournful sibling devastated by my actions. Emily was always jealous of our success. She wailed to the camera, tears streaming down her face. "She's just destroying our family to suit herself." Her cuteness went a long way in winning over emotion from her followers, and she was soon on her way to the limelight again, selling her story, made for media. It just pissed me off, but I knew I couldn't lose my temper. I would not let her pull me off my targets. Instead, I resolved to fight her with her own methods. I got in touch with some leading bloggers and journalists writing about the developing drama, and began feeding them information that blew the lid on the charade. I posted sleep-inducing information on the Carters' crookedness and the fact that Nicole is poison. I wanted the world to see the true Emily Carter, a woman reborn, the phoenix who is coming back to claim her life. It changed when a very well-respected journalist, Megan, found me and wanted to tell my story. She had been keeping up with the scandal and wanted to interview me for an exposé. "Yes," I said, because I realized that now was my opportunity to tell the truth, once and for all. In the interview, I bared my heart and soul, recounting the passage from betrayal to rebirth. I told him how my family had planned against me, appropriated my dreams, and made them their own. Megan listened closely, nodding as I described my process and vision of the future. "This is not just about revenge," I insisted. "It's about who and what I am and what I want from life." The piece rocked the media when it ran. To the public, the Carters were finally appearing for what they really were, self-serving and scheming. The debate above turned my fragile pretenses to Nicole's innocence to dust, and I couldn't help earning back any sympathy from before. It was a delicious irony, and I couldn't stop smiling as I read the comments pouring in, lauding my bravery and calling for accountability. But just when I believed I was gaining momentum, another strange turn threatened to ruin everything. Angry with negative attention, my dad decided to fight back. He started rumors about my business practices, that I was a fame seeker using my newfound stardom to prey on the very women I swore to empower. He attempted to sabotage my credibility, but I was prepared for him. I had everything that had ever been said, every false allegation lodged, documented, and was prepared to respond to his attacks publicly. The last straw was when I got a tip from an anonymous source, someone on the inside who had seen what my father was up to. They gave me the key evidence, documents demonstrating Jonathan had been conducting unethical business with the help of law enforcement officers in an effort to save his failed company of fast food restaurants. The evidence was damning, including fraudulent transactions, tax evasion, and even collusion with suppliers to overcharge. That was the ammunition I needed to flip the battle decisively. With Rachel, my attorney, we prepared very carefully to give this story to the press. I knew this would not only bring my father's corruption to light, but it would also be the last straw that would put the nail in the coffin of the Carter family empire. Now, they both wanted the world to see the reality of who they were behind their masks. When we arranged a press conference to announce the evidence, I was both excited and nervous. That was it, the moment I had been waiting for. I stepped up in front of the cameras, adrenaline racing as I looked out over the reporters. "Today I am here to correct the record," I read, my voice in check. I raised the documents above my head for the cameras to catch a hold of the smoking gun. "My father's entire empire is built on lies and illusions," she said, "and he's going to be brought to justice." A gasping burst into the room as I revealed the deceptions Jonathan had concocted, the lies he'd told to protect his name. The burden of so many years of betrayal was lifted as I spoke. It was my moment of triumph, and I would take back my story. To his horror, Jonathan's world crumbled around him as the news spread like wildfire. Police began investigating his business practices, and his restaurants came under immediate suspicion. The empire he had worked so hard for was crumbling, and I could sense the panic in his eyes. I felt so incredibly fulfilled in that moment. I had effectively flipped the script on the people who had attempted to bury me. I wasn't in a helpless role anymore. I was a strong woman who had been betrayed, who had been used, who had been hurt, but who had risen from it all, not to take back the man who had so hurt me, but to take back myself. And I felt lighthearted as I walked from the press conference. The final blow was dealt, and my family would have to deal with the aftermath of their actions, but I was prepared to face the future. I have fought for my dreams, my identity, and my truth. And now, I was free. If you've ever been in a situation where you just felt betrayed, if you've ever felt like you've wanted to take back control of your life, then don't forget to like this video, share it with someone that you know who needs to hear it, and hit that subscribe button. Believe me, the best way to ascend is on your own.